They often paint a picture that's a bit more black and white, where this person is clearly the villain and this woman is clearly the victim. And you could see, like, how could she possibly experience that at this person's hand? Or when she does experience it, she's out right away and has a revelation. You don't normally see how gray it can be and how confusing it can be, and how you can be a woman with confidence and agency and know better and still not see all of the red flags that you should. I want to honor this book and this character that people love so much, but you also want to bring a life and a humanity to it that is true to who you are.
Talking about how sometimes you were even the intimacy coordinator.
That shouldn't be happening, by the way. I just want to be clear that you should not be the intimacy coordinator. You should definitely hire intimacy coordinators, which we did have.
Justin, how to pull you in.
Where have you seen
that.
this?
That
I
clip?
actually just saw it too. It was on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, you know, romance.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a wonderful day. If you're enjoying this coverage of It Ends With Us, trust me, you are going to be in for a ride with this video. I uploaded a video yesterday and we were talking about the motive. Why did Blake and Ryan hijack a film? And why are they leveling these allegations against Justin Baldoni and Wayfair, despite all of these breadcrumbs and evidence that are coming out that dispute and refute and exonerate Baldoni and Wayfair of any liability here? We introduced this idea yesterday that Blake Lively was desperate to recover and rehab her image after a failure at the box office. She basically hijacked the previous film that she bombed, which was Rhythm Section. That's a whole story for another day. We'll cover that, I promise. And we discussed that Ryan believed he was the benevolent husband and the savant marketer, and no one but Ryan could fix the script because he didn't read the book. And their narcissism, their ego, their greed, their desire for a sequel and controlling a franchise, I believe, is the motive here. And I think Baldoni's lawsuit very succinctly suggests what her motive is. And in his lawsuit, in his amended complaint, what I love about Brian Friedman is that Brian uses language where it's very clear that they understand that this is a narcissistic smear campaign. And one of the most common things that happens with a narcissistic smear campaign is that they try to reverse victim perpetrator. And that's what Blake's attorneys are saying, that this is a common tactic used by perpetrators. But the truth is, she instigated this all by giving the CRD complaint, a confidential document, by the way, to the New York Times. So the CRD complaint was leaked in December to the New York Times, but this was after months of all of these leaked stories by her camp to the various tabloids about hostility on the set, discussions of his inappropriate behavior, lingering kisses, making her feel uncomfortable, unsafe work environments, competing with the narrative of her hijacking a film and creative differences. Baldoni's side kept things pretty factual. They didn't trade barbs so much, but the narrative being painted by Blake was that Baldoni and Wayfair were dangerous. And even with her continued filings in court by claiming they need this like super high protective order because of all the celebrities involved in this, and she's trying to connect random comments and messages that people receive in their DMs to Wayfair, which is hilarious. I mean, it's not hilarious that these people are receiving threats. It's hilarious that they assume it's from Wayfair, because anyone with any social media presence and any celebrity could probably at any time in their day find threats in their DMs. I could probably find 10 in mine if I looked very deeply. And I'm pretty sure it's not Wayfair doing this to me. It's an unfortunate part of this job, and no one should be sending those kinds of threats, by the way. But she's using divisive language even in her filings to try to paint him as dangerous. And as if we can ramp up this energy that he's dangerous, there's this concept that like he's so dangerous, why would anyone want to work with him? And it's just the continuation of a smear campaign because if no one wants to work with him, if Sony won't work with him and other, large distribution companies won't work with him and other companies won't hire him, he's pushed out of the industry. And then she can control the Colleen Hoover franchise. And this is in his complaint. In the end of this, on page 111, this is how they lay it out. In the end, empowered by her celebrity firepower and her powerful allies, Lively did exactly what she set out to do. She took someone else's movie for her own, destroying years of creative vision and careful planning in service of her own brand building campaign. But why would Lively even seek to seize power over the film? Why would she insist on taking on additional work for no additional pay or credit? It's a good question. This is what their belief is, and I think it matches. On information and belief, Lively may have been motivated by a number of factors. She may have wanted to seize control over the film so that she could take over the production of the sequel. It starts with us. This motivation also explains why the cast, who may have hoped and or been promised a role in a subsequent production, would choose to side with the powerful couple, who themselves may genuinely believed they could destroy Baldoni and Wayfarer and force them to cede or even sell the rights to the sequel, or even sell. It's in a quotation. I want you to marinate on that for a second. Or Lively may have felt driven to match her star husband, Ryan Reynolds, who is widely reported to have insisted on taking so much control over film Deadpool 2 that director Tim Miller left the production. Seeing the fame and success that Ryan Reynolds commanded, she may have adopted his often repeated pattern wholesale to seize her own power and control, following his lead and evidenced by many statements by Lively that he is involved in every project she works on and vice versa. Lively and Reynolds, accustomed to getting their way, perhaps felt entitled. Regardless of why, Lively insisted on seizing control of the film, and that is precisely what she did. There can be no justification for her Machiavellian and civilly extortionate tactics deployed to grab complete control over the film. Lively also sought ultimate control over the film in the hope of boosting her own brand and business ventures. In the end, though, Lively's own words and promotional strategy led to an avalanche of negative press. So, if we're understanding it in this context, Tim Miller was pushed out after Deadpool the first, and Ryan took over the franchise. People that worked on the first of Deadpool have spoken about this in length. And the actual creator of Deadpool was basically sidelined at the premiere of Deadpool and Wolverine. The creator, the actual person that writes the comics, he spoke out about how he was treated at the Deadpool and Wolverine premiere. And it sounded kind of like how they treated Baldoni. And I'll get into that into another video. But getting back to the sequel. So when all of this was kicking off and all of this drama was unfolding in real time while the movie was like breaking box office numbers for the fact that it was on a very big budget, and all this drama was kicking off, there was a lot of discussion about, well, now that this has been successful, obviously you're going to do the sequel. It starts with us, right? And then there was these back and forth. He's evil. Baldoni's dangerous. He makes everyone uncomfortable. Everyone hates him. And we know that Leslie Sloan was filtering that narrative to the Daily Mail and to other outlets. We know that Baldoni and his side was trying to counter what they were already putting out and having to be extremely careful that this didn't appear to be retaliation, because she drafted that document and they never said they did anything wrong. If you read the actual document, they never acknowledged that they did anything wrong in their back to work agreement. There was no acknowledgement that they did anything. They wanted, as you know, Baldoni and Wayfarer to put out a statement taking ownership. for the negative press that was happening and for all the backlash that Blake was receiving. And they refused because, as Baldoni's lawyers state, it would have been career ending. Any lawyer will tell you you don't apologize for anything, period, when it comes to work, because apologizing is akin to liability. If his team would have admitted to what Ryan and Blake wanted them to put out publicly, it could have ended the studio and no one would have ever worked with them again, even though it didn't directly have the words that what she was implying happened. They were trying to get them to admit liability, which would then have opened up litigation that nobody's going to admit to what they wanted them to admit to, especially if you didn't do it. They did all these different things to try to get them to bend, right? So that the backlash that they were getting for the bad campaign for the marketing could be reversed. But as people started talking about the sequel, I noticed that in September there was this blink again and you'll miss it article on Life and Style. And the article was that Blake Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds, is willing to buy out Justin Baldoni from It Ends With Us. First off, he doesn't need to be bought out. Bought out implies a partnership. And Blake does not have a partnership with Wayfair for this film. When they bought this film in 2019, she didn't know about it. A buyout would imply that you were in a business relationship. That's just how arrogant this seems. Like they put money into it, and so therefore they should just be happy with this amount. And the article says Ryan Reynolds will do anything and spend any amount to ensure It Ends With Us does not end without wife Blake Lively. Ryan is willing to offer millions to Blake's director and co-star Justin Baldoni in an attempt to buy out his stake in the franchise so Blake can continue her role without having to work with Baldoni, with whom she clashed, a source exclusively tells Life and Style. Do you like how they're trying to position this, that it was his stake? A stake would imply that there was a percentage and that Blake and Ryan owned a percentage of it and Wayfair owns a percentage of it. Wayfair and Wayfair alone, whose CEO and whose forming member is Justin Baldoni, owns the rights and nobody else. But they are positioning it like it's a buyout, like this is a business that has dissolved. A buyout also suggests that there is like they have to do a buyout because they're severing ties. The problem here is that he doesn't have to sell. Justin can put It Starts With Us on a shelf and literally never release it to the public because he owns it. And I'll explain to you in a second article that I found. This is what the source also said. This is the biggest film Blake has ever made. Ryan wants to make sure she isn't replaced in the sequel. So the implication here is that they know that Blake is replaceable. They also know that Blake has no claim to the sequel, but they're trying to position it that it's a buyout. Well, friends, as I've done some sleuthing, and I do this via Google and I do this through customized searches, I found an article from Variety magazine from late August, a beautiful article that explains the exact details about these rights. And she is SOL, my friends. It says Wayfair and Baldoni hold the rights to both novels and don't merely have an option, as is often the case with hot literary properties. Therefore, he doesn't need to renew an agreement, which typically expire 18 months after inking a deal, and is the sole party who can determine its fate, according to sources familiar with the terms. The deal was ironed out after the novel had sold a number of copies, but before Hoover became huge on Book Talk, which is part of TikTok, and it was well before she hit the New York Times bestseller. She got super big in 2021, 2022, and 2023. So here's where it gets tricky. Prior to the film's release, Baldoni told Variety regarding the sequel that he and Wayfair haven't even begun to think that far ahead. because I'm trying to stay in the present as much as I can. However, industry sources say it's hard to imagine the creative minds at Wayfair, which has back titles like the Garfield movie and the upcoming Will Ferrell documentary, Will and Harper, haven't considered adapting a second installment in the widely popular two-part book series. Now, this is where Sony siding with Blake makes sense. Sony has the automatic option to distribute a theoretical sequel, but can't force a follow-up film without involvement from Wayfarer. The second novel takes place a few months after the events of the first, so producers likely wouldn't want too much time to pass at the risk of the actors aging out of their roles. Entertainment industry sources also note that ideally no more than 2 or 3 years would pass between installments to sustain audience interest. Did you hear that? Sony has the automatic option to distribute it, but they can't force Wayfair to make the film. So, if Justin doesn't want to work with Blake, and if Justin, having been just terrorized to this process, doesn't want to have to deal with that narcissistic abuse again, he doesn't have to make the film. And I don't think the second part of the series is even that. I haven't read it. I did read It Ends With Us, but It Ends With Us is her biggest selling book, over 10 million copies. It Starts With Us, I think it's sold 3 million. Not shabby by any means, but it's not It Ends With Us, and the story is completely different. It's the reason why It Ends With Us is a bigger selling book is because of the content and because of the story and the breaking generational cycles. And It Starts With Us is about forming their new life. The drama is in It Ends With Us. The journey really is in It Ends With Us. And It Starts With Us, while it was a big title, isn't as big and isn't as well known and by far isn't the fan favorite. So, yes, they could make a sequel, but I don't, there's no way to prove that it would be as successful. So Sony, if they move forward with a sequel, they have to contractually allow Wayfair to make the film. Blake can't make it. She can't. They exclusively own the rights. There's no option. It's not like he tentatively owns it. She sold the rights completely. Colleen Hoover did in 2019. She gave up all ownership. There's no buyout. You can't force a buyout. You can't. You simply cannot force Wayfair to do anything. So if you can't force someone to do something and you want to make the film and you want the franchise, I don't know, wouldn't false accusations be a great way to tarnish the studio that has the film and the rights to the film so that you can make it yourself? And because of the pre-existing relationship that Reynolds has with Sony and the fact that they look at Reynolds as dollar signs. They don't care who he is. Studios are notoriously unethical. And what's clear is that the narrative that Baldoni is dangerous is also being flipped because it would appear that Ryan Reynolds is the one that's dangerous because they were warned, according to Baldoni, that if they didn't comply, the gloves would be off. And this was a veiled threat that people at their agency, WME, said they should take seriously. And that a lot of people in the industry were scared of the tactics that these two will employ. And, I think what it comes down to is that narcissists do not like to be told no. And so if you don't give in like Tim Miller did, it sounds like Tim Miller was worn down so much by Ryan Reynolds and his need for control. And even though he didn't own the franchise, he basically just gave it to him because he didn't want to deal with Ryan anymore. And they are somehow thinking that they can do the same thing to Baldoni, but they can't. And so now they're doing everything they can, in my opinion, to get them to give them the film and let them buy it. The problem is that Baldoni doesn't have to do anything at all. He owns it. And the more that Reynolds and Lively get muddied in this campaign, the worse their reputations are becoming. And on top of that, the more exposure to their illicit activities in order to obtain power are becoming exposed. One thing that's really getting glossed over in all of this is that Ryan is part of the Writers Guild Association. And as someone that's a part of the Writers Guild, you can't do uncredited work. In the same article about the sequel, they also talk about how Ryan's involvement in the film is a huge issue and could potentially get him in trouble with the Writer Guild Association. It said Ryan's involvement raises a second WGA issue. The film began production on May 5th, 2023, 3 days after the start of last summer's WGA strike. Reynolds, who received a screenwriter's credit on Deadpool 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine, is a WGA member and would have been barred from contributing to the screenplay between May 2nd and September 20th, 2023. Writers picketed the New Jersey site, and production was paused in late June 2023 before the SAG-AFTRA strike commenced in July. A source close to Reynolds says he took a pass on the film's rooftop scene in April of 2023. But here's another issue. On top of the fact that there was a strike, it could be a violation because he contributed to the screenwriting without properly obtaining a credit. And Baldoni didn't know that. So if they didn't know that and they didn't credit him, and Ryan did it, and he knows that he's a part of the WGA, he can't be doing under the table writing and still maintain good standing with the WGA. So Ryan's involvement here, to me, what I see is a man that believes that he doesn't have to play by the rules. Like, this is a man that's cutthroat. He will do whatever he can to succeed. He doesn't care who he stomps on. I mean, it should have been evidenced by the fact that he was with Alanis Morissette and then left her and then basically got married to Scarlett Johansson right away. And then right after he was still married to Scarlett, met Blake. This man is social climbing. He social climbed through women. He social climbs through movies. He steals movies. And his wife has obviously learned from him. And this man is so insecure in his own masculinity and his own controlling behavior that his wife is not allowed to be on a set without him there. There's this trope that they push that they are trying to say is endearing, and it's that they never work apart from each other and that they always alternate and that they're always on the set with one another. And Blake has made public comments about how she sometimes feels like she needs him around when other men are around because she doesn't know if there's something that's going to happen with the other men. And she's fully admitted to misinterpreting men in her interactions with them and then fearing her husband's jealousy. If Ryan is so insecure that his full-grown wife can't go out on a movie set and work, and he's so insecure about her own ability to do her job that he has to interject, is that a loving husband or is that an abusive husband? I think that there's some abusiveness in that dynamic. He's also 12 years older than her and met her when she was very young. Not saying that Blake Lively is at all perfect or a wilting lily, as she says, but Blake is becoming who Ryan is. And I think together they are very toxic. And the motive is very obvious that much like what they did to Tim Miller with Deadpool, they're trying to bully Baldoni into selling the rights to the movie. And because he wouldn't take liability and he wouldn't apologize, and because he won't sell the film to them, and because Blake said, "I'll follow you anywhere," this is the result. And they're making good on the threat that the gloves will come off. Baldoni's lawyers, I think, are keenly aware to a very great degree about what has been done. And I think that's why they've shared what they've shared in their complaints without giving away the whole story. And a complaint doesn't have to give away the whole story. These complaints are written like narratives so that the public can feast on them and get excited. It feels very PR, but they're giving us enough so that we as a public are aware of what's happening. Both sides are. The problem with Blake's is that everything that they cite in their complaint is You can find it and it doesn't even say what they say it says. Completely the opposite with Baldoni's. Ryan Reynolds has a mission, has a goal, and if he doesn't get his way, he's going to bully his opposition into submission. Is that a good husband? Is that a good business person? Or is that just a ruthless sociopath? Maybe the sociopath is Ryan Reynolds. Justin Baldoni isn't looking that way to me. But knowing all of this now, and knowing that this could be because of the way that these contracts are signed, because there's nothing Colleen can do. And by the way, I want to end this by saying Colleen is not a victim. She was paid handsomely for this. She didn't get, for her to act like she's a victim is hilarious because she made a lot of money on that film. When the film was released and in the months of the release, that woman bought a $5 million home in Washington in Puget Sound. This is not a woman that is a victim. She made money too. And for Blake to make her feel like she's a victim and that she doesn't have rights, girl, you sold your rights. You gave them up. You got paid. Justin is suing for civil extortion. And extortion is obtaining property through threats and coercion. And if the threat is we will destroy you unless you pay up or unless you let us buy the film, that sounds like extortion to me. And knowing now the way these contracts were set up, they took these steps believing that Justin would just give in. And Justin said, hold my espresso, because he doesn't drink. Let's play ball. And Ryan and Blake didn't realize that Justin was not the one to mess with. So, what are your thoughts about it? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed. I'm so happy to see so many of you subscribing and all of your new faces. I appreciate you being here, and tell me all of the things in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.